Welcome, Adventure. I'm GM Goblin, your GM Goblin, and today I'm going to talk about high level, something that not everyone gets to experience. And if you do, a lot of times it's a one shot. Today I'm going to delve into some of the APs use, as well as what I think makes good high level play. Stick around. We dream of playing high level play. In fact, whenever I create a character, I always plan him out, usually with options, for the first 10 levels or more, depending on how long I think it's going to go. Well, depending whether you're making your own campaign or if you're using AP, there's different things that I think high level needs other than just eating each other's HP, hitting each other back and forth. Now, high level play, one of the biggest problems, and the reason so many campaigns and so many groups fall, is going to be the fact that at high level play, your characters, your players, are going to have so many options at their. Rise of the Rune Lord is one of those that you plan right. Not only do you have the options which it kind of expects, but you can also make some of the encounters fairly trivial. Now, APs generally are considered for your medium level players. You don't have to be a real min-maxer to get through an AP. And they kind of expect you to have an arcane caster, at least, probably some kind of caster with healing ability. Take care of curses and the like. Well, in Rise of the Rune Lord, one of the main things before you get to some of the last chapter is going to be casting different kinds of magic onto different stones. They're expecting you to have these different spells. So if you're a party full of fighters, you're going to end shortly in book 5 before you can get any farther. And then as we go on, and you defeat the dragon that is in your way, which they can take to the air at this level, mid-teens, you should easily be able to take care of that with your party. Being able to cast all of you, being able to fly, but that is one of the deals with knowing what a higher level party can do. You're going to expect them to have to use resources to make everybody fly, to make combat either functional, which is some things that I do, if they don't fly or they don't perform a certain action and use their resources, or to at least make it easier. Flying dragon that you can't down to a party that is on the ground, you're leaving a lot of the damage on the table. So it's expected for you to be able to fly. And so, like many things, they expect you to have certain levels of capability, either certain amounts of damage to be put out, or certain spells to be able to use. Other things, whenever you look at a rune forge, there are a few of the runes which can be made completely trivial. If you throw the right spell or buff onto a party, you're completely immune to mind affecting abilities or death effects, depending if your players are smart enough to figure out what they're up against. And these things should be expected whenever you go into higher level fights. Looking over the last part of Rise of the Rune Lords, you can see one of the things they do is pack some decent casters, but for the most part, you're looking at a lot of beaters, a lot of hit point sacks, and a building which requires them to traverse and use up the resources. Using up your party's resources and knowing not only what they have at their disposal, but using their resources is something you severely have to pay attention to whenever you run, and especially if you make high-level encounters. So giving them things that they have to use these resources against to get past. This is fairly straightforward. The Pinnacle of Avarice is going in, it's fighting a bunch of mobs, a few casters, but nothing actually too hard when it comes to the players that I had last, which all of them were playing not only functional, but over prepared characters. And so sometimes I have to make things. Now, at the end of this AP, your characters are going to be level 17. So you have at least one, hopefully two casters that are going to have 9th level spells. If you're using Arcane, then you're looking at them performing time stops and Mage's Disjunction, requiring you to focus on different ways of protecting your big bad. Avarice has things set up to where they have giants from the side, but time stop right as they come in, characters being prepared. The ability to use monsters and summoning purple worms multiple times is going to make it so that they pull a lot of the heat off your players. But as a DM, you should be able to realize, especially at this point, what your players are going to do. And even though Karzog is fairly formidable at a CR 21, the reality of it is that if I played just by the AP for my last party that went through this, with the ability for them to mention door and all their buffs, they could end the fight actually extremely quickly. Your parties are going to focus on their AC, on getting up their standard defenses, which they should, and they're going to focus on being able to put out massive amounts of damage to be able to eat through any one single target as quickly as possible. So whenever my party went through this, I reworked him. I changed his spells. I prepared for them to come through. I used multiple Mage's Disjunctions to break all of their buffs, causing them to have to spend time to reapply them and destroying a lot of their equipment, or at least making it non-functional. I did destroy a couple things actually, to kind of soften them up. Otherwise, you're looking at, and especially when you're not going to be using casters, you're looking at racing through hit points. High level parties, even when my players are going through something like this where they're level 17 and they have all their 9th level spells and they have all of that ego that goes with it, I plan out puzzles for them to get past that are things that they can't just get through. I make areas that are enchanted so that the players can't use certain magic in the areas. And I'll give them hints whenever they use detect magic or there's something on the wall or it's a way that they go in. This puzzle that I have here requires them to use keys over on the left side, which each party member was only able to have one. They would get an enchantment, and then it would only transfer in one direction. So a player would get in here and move, and then eventually they would have to transfer their key to another so that that player could get through by touching, giving them something to do other than walk up, cast spell, because as one of them always says, magic solves everything. Well, making the room dampen things like conjuration so that they can't teleport through or detour to the other side, which requires a living hand to open, requires them to work out the puzzle. Giving them something to do other than just cast a spell is an excellent thing to do, especially when you have high level play. This is something that you see a lot in low level play, with being able to fly or levitate or pick locks or something. But due to the magical options that players have in Pathfinder as they advance and all of the gear that they have, it's something that dies out. Making a 10,000-year-old tomb that has been enchanted to not allow individuals to pass through walls whenever they go ethereal is another way. Doing these things requires them to use resources to try and figure out either the puzzle or ways around the puzzle that will not work. And then giving them something that they have to think through gives them something that they will enjoy, remember, and doesn't just require them to cast a spell. Now, the good thing of running a game while you're not following an AP is I get to adjust all of my encounters to my players without having to worry if I heard something or mess with it. But I did that with my Rise of the Rune Lord campaign as well. A lot of the campaign I added to the NPCs to increase either their AC, their attack, and I leveled all of them up using templates, things like that. While it does add to the difficulty of the AP or the adventure you're running, you also need to know what is going to be too much for your party. In this map, I had a character that could see through fog with its senses, and she had features that would allow her to deal damage. Also, knowing what your characters do for defenses and how high their defenses are, paying attention to them so that you're able to actually deal damage to them to use resources. In this campaign, my players have an absurdly large amount of healing, and most players would tell you that they don't heal during combat because until you get the heal spell, it doesn't make any sense to waste the time, waste your action on healing something that's not specifically saving a life instead of just taking out the bad guy. Because heal heals so much. In my case, it's able to heal, I think, all the party members to full. So doing that and being able to down party members and having the ability to, at will, things like power word stun character, it allows me to knock players out. Then they have to use something to either incapacitate this player, using resources not just to attack them, but she had multiple fairly capable men with her that they had to deal with, meant they had to find ways to use the resources to detain and slow her down while they took care of the others instead of just jumping to the big bad of this dungeon. And every turn that they take not doing this or attempting to do something else, you use the big bad, or I love using casters, using things at this level like maze, power word stun, to be able to knock out players so that the other players need to think what to deal with the threat. Lets them focus on things more than just dealing damage. Same thing when it comes to making your players think is adding environmental properties to your encounter. Not just having mobs that are beaters coming in and your casters which are there to either stun or try and do massive damage or crowd control, but having things environmentally with the fight, requiring the players to use their brain and call outs while they're playing to shut off certain effects or to cause certain effects in order to damage or stop something from healing a mob. So if you have a negative energy flooding into a room, they can easily protect themselves against that. Same thing with having things like fire that envelop a room. But having undead that are not affected by fire, or having undead that are being healed by that negative energy, allows you to force your players, even at high levels, you're dealing with the mob, to have to deal with something else. And it might require them to use a spell they're not used to. It's not just confusion and maze and that's it. They're also needing to deal with other ones. I also like to put in 4th edition these low-level mobs that are able to deal damage, but they die very easily. This allows me to give something like a 9th level wizard, which is great at single target, even at high levels, being able to maze opponents, being able to stun them, power word them, something. But giving these masses of mobs, that it gives me something to attack either the wizard or another party member who's got mirror image, because everyone loves mirror image, which would knock all their images away. I mean, the mob's big hitters come in and they can more easily damage or endanger your caster. But also gives something that the casters can focus on, deal their fairly moderate damage to take out all of these smaller mobs, this large group, while your main party is dealing with the real beaters in the encounter. Now, something that is not always present in some of the other games, they use mobs instead. Curses in some of our lower level events or haunts I have used, and I use them as ways of making traps. Say you have these high level encounters and you have a sphere that stops magic, requiring them to physically move in and out, and then also things requiring them to activate or destroy different gems or pillars somewhere in the arena. Doing this requiring them to unlock or to start a next phase in the encounter. I look a lot to video games. You can even look at anime. Doing this helps to create something that is definitely more engaging to your players than just having a big bad come in and then having a few mobs summon in. And things like this where I have traps set up or random effects that happen throughout the field. I'll do that as ways of keeping the party on their toes. Traps that deal disenchantment or mage's disjunction. Doing this to players when they're not normally able to check for traps is going to keep them up, going to cause them to split up. They don't group together. So you can't depend on just one individual using D-Door or something to get you somewhere, because if it hits all of you, then everyone is affected. It could end your party. But while I think it's good to pick your monsters, including your big bad of your campaign, then I also think the location and the setting that you have is just as important. Knowing that when they have so much at their disposal, requiring them to use a full action to move past a barrier, to get to an objective, or requiring them to use resources like D-Door just to activate or to stop the activation of a pillar. Like I said, I use it with games, and you see it in games a lot, but you don't always see it when it comes to encounters in an AP or something. And it's just something that I always like to throw at my parties, just to keep them thinking, keep them guessing. And it keeps them with having to leave their kit open for the possibility of using different spells that are just the same ones. Mostly, whenever you're doing what I do with this campaign and making all the encounters, because you run it from scratch, you're running a home game, learning your players, learning their class is going to be the best things whenever you run it. High-level campaigns are, especially when you run sometimes in 15 monsters against your party, all in one encounter. And you have to know how to use their abilities and everything, and running them off of a VTT is great. But those high-level casters can be something to deal with. So giving them something specific, or in my case, I tend to have mobs coming in with lots of attacks to take care of either that mirror image, or even at this high level, having true sight that can look past it entirely. Keeping them so that they're not arrogant in their magic, and they're able to think and keep that emergency force shield on them so that they can pop it. Or whenever they come into an encounter, requiring them to put life bubble on everyone because there's no oxygen in the area. And then using dispels to get rid of their buffs. And I have a character that is madly in love with buffs on all of his characters, which is great. But I also am madly in love with greater dispel and mage's disjunction. Being able to remove that and cause them to think and rebuff and spend that time to either protect themselves, to retreat, and then advance. Way it's not just rush and it's done. Just remember to, you have everything as a GM at your disposal. Know what your players, and then plan accordingly. And make them use all of their abilities. Require something to be tapped. If you've got a big bad, let him retreat behind a force field. Let him use force bubbles and heal. And it's not something that it's in all the campaigns. I even had them one time, they were playing level 20 campaign, and I had a big ICR beater in there with them that was resistant to almost all magic. And the main character was a caster. Then halfway through it, she retreated, and she actually hid out in a dimensional pocket that was visible. I just had to find it in the room. And then the big bad was able to cast from there. How it was set up. And then all they had to do was find her. But by then, she was able to heal herself, and there they go again. But yeah, always remember to try and keep it interesting for your players. Things don't have to be easy, even at high levels, and it's a lot of bookkeeping. And encounters take a long time. My characters are hitting 19, and I'm going to go through an entire, basically taking them to what would be level 21 before they end this campaign. So it's a long process at high levels, and being the GM, you're going to spend a lot of time when it comes to monsters to make it good. But I think at this level, with so few players that actually get to play very much or very long in it, a good thing. They've spent a year or more getting to this point. They've invested time and sweat and memories, so make it memorable for them and put your all in.
If you like this video, check out my others. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. If you have any tips or requests, drop them in the comments below. And until next time, may your crits be epic, your adventures legendary, and your gaming table filled with laughter.